an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Reaper, Cradle Book 10, Chapters 14, 15, 16, and 17. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we're covering 4 this week so that I can do 3 for the next following final episodes. There's so much to talk about in this section, but the thing that I'm mostly preoccupied by, what is happening with fucking Dross now. Can he get a break? Can Lyndon get a break? Can I get a break? As a reader, I would like one. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. Andy, what's up if you're out there? So yeah, guys, this section is just packed. I had to read more chapters, like I said in the intro, in order to make sure that I was going to be able to break it up evenly for the rest of the book, because there's nothing worse with a series that's as dense as this than having more chapters than usual for the last episode of the wrap-up, because then I have no time to talk about everything. It's just impossible. So I really wanted to make sure that I got that out of the way earlier and left myself a little bit of breathing room. That said, I feel like I picked a pretty good section to do it in, because this is a really, really action-heavy section, and I don't feel that I really need to talk about each individual, attack separately, if you know what I mean. I just can give you the broad strokes, and I will tell you guys what. Normally, with this series, I almost always do the audiobooks, because Travis Baldree is a gift. But I started... I'm really wondering, actually, how many of you guys are going to be able to relate to this, because I always wonder if it's just me, or if I am uniquely, unable to follow a certain thing. I listened to the beginning of chapter 14, which, for those who are not, following along, has to do with Surreal and her gambit to, get all of the other judges involved, even though they, won't agree to it. And I found myself sort of tuning in again after about, the first 8 minutes had passed, and I realized that I had no idea what was going on. And there's a temptation for me to call what's going on with the Abidan the weakest part of these books, but I don't really even feel like that's fair. I think it's just that I have a lot of trouble following this for some reason. And I've been trying to sort of decipher why that is, because from the start, this has been an issue for me. But I've said before that when I went back and listened to earlier parts of the series, I realized what was being set up, and I understand it a little bit better because I have context now that I didn't have before. But I can't, keep up with it while it's happening. It feels like I have to go back and reread later, because in the moment, it doesn't, quite land for me. And the thing that I've sort of put my finger on, it's as close as I can get to, a real answer to my question as to why it's hard for me. I think that so little of what's going on with the Abidan feels grounded in any sort of limit that I, as a regular human being, can understand, that it feels like there is no ceiling on what anybody can do, and therefore literally anything is possible at any time, in a way that feels less exciting than it does I can just do what I want. Does that make sense? And I'm not saying this in terms of really believing that there's no ceiling. I'm saying it in terms of what it feels like for me understanding it as I'm reading it. You know, what's going on with Lyndon, I know what the limits are in his universe. I am aware of what people are and aren't able to do and what the limits are with like monarchs versus our team who does not have a monarch on it. And so the team getting away with being alive is honestly, I see that as a win, because I can understand from the beginning that they were up against somebody that was literally unbeatable for them. There was just no way. However, with the Abidan, I don't feel like I truly get where our limits are for anybody. So every time that he says so-and-so did XYZ, I just go, okay, I guess they can do that. And if they can't against somebody else because that person has more power in whatever way, I just have to go, okay, I guess they can't do that. And it doesn't feel like I have any of my own context and understanding to bring to it at all. It's just sort of happening to me on the page. And so I lose track because I am literally so like in the moment because I can't really grip onto anything that it just slides off me. Does that make sense? And I don't know. I just really, I want this to land more for me. And it's not like when I went back and reread it on the page, I felt like I definitely got it more in terms of just being able to keep track of what the plot was doing. But I don't feel like I have a better sense in general, because eventually we just wind up going into like a big Abidan battle in Fathom. And from what I understood based on like earlier commentary by Will White, I would have thought that a big Abidan fight that close to any of the iterations would like destroy the iteration. You know, it was just like, I would think their proximity, because they're like breathing all this relief because Abidan are here and they knew they were in danger and now they're not anymore. And then we've got like the baddies showing up and they just begin to fight. And I'm like, okay, the whole point to this though is that Suriel is trying to save people. This feels like it should annihilate the entire planet. Like, that's the level of power that I'm understanding people are using here. So I don't know, guys. I feel like really frustrated because I thought getting into this book that I was starting to get it a little bit more. And the more we go, like the further we go, I think what's going on is that I never really grasped everything with the Abidan to begin with. So now that it's getting torn apart by the Vroshir and by the Mad King, I never had a good grasp. So it being torn apart makes it just more confusing. Instead of it feeling like, oh, this is an emergency situation where I get what's going on and I can see the breakage. Instead, it always felt kind of broken in my head. And so this feels just like, oh, now I'm never going to get it now. It's just like, it's over. It's too late. So anyway, I just wanted to share with you guys that because this is something that can happen with all kinds of stuff, like audiobooks, podcasts. You know, you realize that you've like tuned out and you have to go back and re-listen. And that happens to me as much as it happens to anybody. But I have never had that with these books. I have never just like felt like I tuned out, and when I tuned back in, I genuinely was like, wait, what? I don't even get this at all. That's never been an issue. So I just wanted to talk to you guys about this because I have to think that I probably encounter this problem in a different way than a lot of you guys. Most of you are binging the book as soon as it comes out. And so you don't need to understand really, because it's just, you're just going through it, right? And so you get to the other end and things wind up making sense. And then you can just sit back and you've consumed the whole thing in the matter of like a day, and you have your rear view mirror to use. But because I'm going through it chapter at a time and I have to talk about it, I feel like it's a lot more difficult if you don't get it in my position. So anyway, I just wanted to address that because I'm going to sort of skim through what's going on with Surreal. Like I said, she's really focused on trying to save some like specific iterations, including Cradle. And she's talking to her presence about it. And her presence asks her flat out, like, how much of a priority is this? And initially her instinct is to just be like, it's the highest, otherwise why would I ask? And then she has to stop and be like, okay, well, my presence is asking me this because it's in my head, which means that it has a reason. And when she stops and thinks about it, she realizes that, like, it isn't a priority, actually. It's just that she has a particular, like, affection for these iterations that's personal to her. And she has to sort of, like, come to terms with the fact that if she's going to make a move, it's going to be just pure because she wants to and not because it's, like, a tactical move. Because that's what she was, like, trying to do. She initially is like, I'm going to try and set this argument up so that I can present saving these iterations as being just, like, a military advantage. And then they won't be able to, like, argue with me. And she sort of has to face that it's not actually going to work. That argument, if anything, argues for leaving those iterations alone to die because they aren't worth it. So she jumps in to the way in a spot that she knows is going to put her in extreme danger because she has used her, presence to map the way that, we've seen Lyndon do so many times, how it would go if she went up against the Mad King. And as it turns out, she would definitely lose, like, almost instantly, if she were by herself. And even with Machiel, it's not going to go great. They would be killed also, and it would be just slightly more time for the Mad King to accomplish it with the two of them. So she's like, all right, I'm going to put myself in this position. Everybody's going to be aware that I'm in this position. And low-key, they all know what she's doing. Like, she has already tried to make a plea outright, and they aren't hearing it. So they are fully aware of what her game is with this right now, And that is, when they wind up descending on Fathom, and the Mad King turns up along with a bunch of these beings that are, like, pressed up against the sort of shield that is around this world now. And there's a description of another world called Amalgam that has lots of beings in it that are extremely dangerous. And it's kind of funny because Surreal is like, not that planet isn't a huge risk if it gets, like, unlocked, but I don't think the Mad King is going to do that right now because those are creatures of destruction also, but they're so chaotic that it's going to be in, like, competition with what he's trying to do. So I think they're going to be last. I don't need to worry about them yet. He's not going to, like, open those wards up, essentially, until he's got everything else in hand. But these beings, they, like, that whole planet is sort of reminding me of the Dread Gods on a totally different scale, of course. So I am sort of, like, anticipating at this point with the mention of those that might be something that once Lyndon eventually ascends, which I'm assuming is going to happen, and I may be completely wrong, but I'm assuming that he is going to, like, wind up having to face those also. Again, I don't know if I'm completely off track or not. It doesn't matter. That's the fun of it. I could just say whatever. Okay. So, sorry. There's so much chatter, guys. It would have destroyed the iteration, but 7 judges together is a very strong stabilizing force, says Caleb. Okay. I will accept that. Rob says, I think what you've said is a valid criticism. Where I like Will's pacing with Lyndon sections, I do find the Abidan sections needing more time and space to breathe. Yeah, I think that maybe if they had, because these feel like Lyndon books interspersed with, like, spikes of Abidan info. And I think maybe it should have, like, there maybe in a couple of books should have been a lot more about the Abidan. Maybe even as much as there was with Lyndon. Not necessarily in every book, but I just need a bit more about how this all works. Some of it I am sure is being kept vague and mysterious for story reasons, but I don't really get the feeling that's why all of it is like that, you know? Let's see. Oh, Nehua says, yep, happens to me. Listening to you has helped me figure out a couple things at times, to be honest. Well, that is like, that helps me. Thank you, Nehua, to know that maybe my stumbling through shit helps other people as well. Evil says, Phantom, unlike many iterations, is big enough to have more than one world. That's why it was hard to and important to destroy first. Caleb says, at Evil, most iterations are many planets. They are entire universes with many planets and galaxies. And Evil says, yes, Phantom was an exception on size. Okay. Caleb says, that's Asylum from Elder Empire. Word? Oh, no. Oh, God, Caleb. I didn't... Okay, well, that's just... I hate that. Ugh, okay. By the way, if you guys haven't read Elder Empire, also by Will White, super fun. I am going to be starting the next 2 books in this, like, sort of side-by-side trilogy in, like, a couple months, so stay tuned for that. Caleb says, I think the Abidan pacing change might be a symptom of Will not knowing if he was going to do 12 or 15 books. Now that he knows he's doing 12, he has to move stuff up a bit. I'm sorry, he's doing 12 and then he's stopping? I didn't know that we knew that, and I don't think that's going to work for me. I'm going to have a talk with him because, look, Will, that's not enough time. I feel like we're going to need 20 books, minimum. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Come on, guys. Like, I'm not wrong, right? Obviously. Anyway, okay, gotta focus again. So that's what's going on with Suriel, and, you know, we have that basically for, like, most of, if not all, chapter 14. So then we go, yeah, it's all of chapter 14. So then we go to 15. And it's moments like this that, for me, you know, I've talked before about like making your characters badasses and how you get across that they're badasses, and how, for me, there are so many moments, and I've made this comparison before, but forgive me, when I talk about lines that don't work, I often tap into, in my opinion, the Dresden Files. I love the Dresden Files books, and I have a lot of fun with them, and I think the concepts in them are really well set up, but there are times where Jim Butcher tries to, like, do a tough guy line or a drama, like, one-liner that feels so cliched or on the border of cliche that it's like, all right, I get that was supposed to be a big moment, but it didn't work for me, but I'll let it go because fine. And Will manages to truly give badass in a lot of moments with all of his people. Like, you know, there is so many that I could point to for Lyndon. My Name Isn't Mercy is one of the ones that comes to mind. With Ethan, way early on, gentlemen, this is a mistake. I'm sorry. I had to, like, stop and fan myself for a second. And this moment with all of them together gives so much badass for me, because it's not that nobody's scared. It's not that nobody is nervous about facing off against a fucking monarch. I mean, Mercy is, like, you know, as far as advancement, I think she's at the bottom other than, like, Blue and, I mean, Zeal's still a little broken, so I don't really know where he stands with that. But, you know, Blue and Orthos have to hide, essentially. And I love that it says like Lyndon tells them to get into the void key, and Orthos starts to argue, and Lyndon just ignores the argument, waits for Orthos to like come to the correct conclusion, and then Orthos is like, oh, fine, okay, yeah, we can't do this. I'm going to move my mic down a little bit, forgive me everybody. But oh God, Caleb. Jim, quote, every female character's boobs really do be boob and bitch butcher. Look, I'm not getting into that today, but you're not wrong, like, at all in any way. Okay. But yeah, everybody is just so ready in this section. I think that was the part that, like, kept sort of getting my attention, is that we have so much preparedness. Everyone has their weapon, their role, their positioning, their timing that they need to like jump in is exact, and they all understand where it needs to be. And it's not to say it doesn't like erupt in chaos eventually as shit really begins to go down, but it feels like they are such a well-oiled machine in so many ways. And there is there's an attitude to them all of treating this as an inevitability. Like, we knew we were going to go up against this guy. We knew that, like, somebody was down here that was going to be insanely powerful, because that was really the only explanation for what was going on. So we're not freaking out, you know? The most we get is Zeal just going, why is a monarch down here? And Yaren just says, same reason we are. And he says, I know why. That question was for the heavens. That was so good. I love all of this. And then we get this, like, again, y'all, I'm gonna keep talking about how Ethan being nervous freaks me out. Ethan stood next to Yaren in fine pink and blue silks. He looked disturbed. His usual smile was missing, as it had been for most of the time they'd spent in this room, and he smoothed his short hair down, though it didn't need it. He looked agitated, which might have made sense in the situation, but it didn't match what Lyndon knew of Ethan. The man should have greeted even certain death with a grin and a joke. So, enough said. I'm nervous. I'm nervous now. You know, I already wasn't excited about being in this confined area, in the fucking, you know, in the labyrinth to begin with, Reigan Shen coming to begin with, and every time it's mentioned that Ethan seems like unsure of himself in any way, it gets worse for me. So, this fight, I was sitting next to Owen, reading it on my phone, and I like had to stop and take a breath, and I just went, this fight, babe. And he goes, it's intense, right? Y'all, I was just not ready. It's so much. And I think part of what is so intense about this, we have seen a lot of fights in these books, you know, they are very action heavy. And it's often been, we're going to jump from one character to another's POV and see what they're each doing against the person that they are facing off against. One of the biggest ones for that for me is like Underlord, where they're in the vault and each of them like has their person that they have to face. And we go from one to the other, and there's context clues in what they're seeing with somebody else that tells us like when in the fight it is for each of them. But this is everybody who we know are pretty fucking strong and gifted in their way, going up against one person. And they all have their extremely specific techniques and their specific, like, psychology behind the way they choose to attack. And it's all unloaded so quickly on top of each other. And yet Reigan Shen feels like, it's not like he's untouchable. Honestly, if he were untouchable, that would almost feel too easy. It just feels like, again, when they get out of it and they're alive, that feels like best case scenario. was a very question. I really genuinely wondered if Ethan was going to die this section. I have never considered that Ethan would die. I'm just going to say that out loud right now so that I can look like a total fucking idiot later when he dies. But I did not even consider that he was on the table to be sacrificed until this. And then I started to genuinely be like worried about it and wonder, is part of his concern that he's trying to like leave a remnant for Lyndon to work with or something? Is that why he's trying to manifest a certain icon so that his remnant will be of a type that because there is a fatalism, when he says Ethan should have been laughing in the face of death. I was like, I do sort of feel that way, but why? And most of the time when he has laughed, it has really given the sense that he's laughing because he genuinely isn't worried, and everyone around him is worried because they're underestimating Ethan because he has kept so many of his abilities secret, and that is his secret weapon. But here, it felt like maybe it was the first time that it wasn't going to go according to plan. Like, every other time that he has faced some pretty big enemies, he's had a moment of like, well, all right, here we go. And I may have to show my cards a little bit more in this one, but I'm not actually concerned for my own safety, really. And I have a whole plan on how this is going to go. And this actually fits pretty well with that. So it's fine. And here, this is like a real vibe of, this isn't how this is supposed to fucking go. Shit. And that is just the worst. I'm just going to be going into the rest of this book extremely fucking paranoid about Ethan's safety. And considering how rock solid he has felt to me so far, that is a kind of shift that I'm not ready for at all and I don't like. So, jumping ahead a little bit here, because like I said, they all come at him. And the only one that he's actually actively dodging is Ethan because he's making spiritual attacks. Everyone else is doing physical attacks and he's just blocking them and it's really not that hard. And then eventually, there's this moment where Lyndon realizes that because Reigan Shen unloads this striker technique of spears heading toward them. These tridents, my bad, not spears, tridents. And Lyndon, because he has Dross, is able to sort of do the thing where he slows stuff down, takes a look at the situation, figures out where he can jump in first that's going to be the most beneficial to everybody here. And then as he's grabbing one and absorbing one, he begins to get a sense of Reigan Shen's attitude here. And he realizes this dude isn't actually trying to do anything that will hurt his weapons, which means if he's not willing to expend weapons on these guys, that he doesn't take them that seriously. And if he doesn't take them that seriously, that means he has not fully unleashed what he can even do yet, which is extremely fucking worrying because they are barely hanging on here. And he isn't apparently even really trying. And that for me, really did make my blood run cold. And again, there are a bunch of moments where I'm like, oh, nice. Because Lyndon cuts a trident in half. One of them, he absorbs the energy. He's doing some shit that I hadn't considered and that is incredibly it's not just brave. It's really creative, And I think that's part of what I find so interesting about abilities like this. You do have to think on your feet in a way that it's not just you don't in other types of battles, because that's not necessarily true. But this is part of the deal with the Uncrowned King tournament is that people would keep certain techniques or attacks secret because they didn't want their enemy to begin to be able to plan how they would block against them, And I realized with this fight in particular, especially when it comes to Lyndon's authority struggling with Reigan Shen's authority in closing portals or continuing a strike. This has been something that I have continued to say I want to see on the screen. And I stand by that, and I think that this could be done if you manage to, like, handle it the right way. It could still be pulled off, but it's moments like this where you are understanding in the moment the type of authority and the way that it works. For example, a portal that Lyndon is trying to force open further, and he wonders whether it's going to work because the portal technically belongs to Reigan Shen, and so it might respond to him over Lyndon. This is a kind of like subtlety to the way this stuff works that I don't know how you fucking explain that on screen. You know, it's like you could explain it in little info dumps all over the place, but then you have to hope your audience keeps all those rules in mind while you're watching the fight, and that's just not going to fucking happen, let's be honest. So you would have to, like, just completely take out a lot of moments like that, which are what makes the book so interesting to me, and I feel like it would be such a loss. But there might not be another way to adapt something like this. So then we start having this whole thing with Dross, who is struggling a lot with the fact that he can't do more. And this was really tough. Guys, this was really tough to read. It's almost like you feel a little bit of Dross's personality beginning to come back in the midst of this, like, total chaos, because he's like, there's a sort of attachment to life that he has gotten in just the little time that he has returned, that you get a sense of regret from him and shame. Lyndon mentions a couple times that it seems like Dross is sort of ashamed that he can't do more. And then at one point when Lyndon is asking for his help, Dross says that will be the last significant action I can take. And that's obviously in this part of the fight, because Lyndon is able to work with Dross again later. But when Dross connects with, I guess, subject 1, and then comes back out and he is a little madman, I was so heartbroken, y'all. I'm not even going to lie to you. That killed me. I was not ready for another huge personality shift. And it's not what's so, like, Dross being just like a program that looks like Dross, doing like really painful imitations of Dross. At least there was like a bit of humor there for me. The thing that I feel about, like, him being this sort of power hungry wannabe despot, is that how you say that? Is that it doesn't quite hit as funny for me. And I'm really wondering if that's me, like, just because I'm feeling sort of tender about this right now, and so it's just not working, or if Will is actually attempting to write it as less funny and make it more alarming. Because it's just the way that Lyndon responds and the way that Ethan responds when he looks up at him and sees Ethan's face and realizes that Ethan is, like, aware of what has likely happened here. It's not just he's not the same because of a terrible injury, but potentially we could bring him back. There has been a fundamental, like, shift when Lyndon looks at his inner workings that has twisted. And it's not that that's irreparable. It's just that Lyndon doesn't really know if it's reparable. And I felt like he seemed to have more hope before. And this seems to have taken the damage to, like, yet another step forward, where it was already like a huge question if we would ever see our Dross again. And now it's like almost further away. Guys, it's keeping things interesting. Okay, it's keeping things interesting. And for that, I approve of it as a reader. We're getting stakes like we have never fucking had before. And the stakes have been pretty fucking high, most of these stories. But to hammer at Dross yet again, like, you know, I wasn't ready for him to be another target like this. I just really, truly am so concerned about him with the, like, mental attitude that he's got going on right now being connected to Lyndon's mind. I don't know what that does to either one of them, and I'm really worried about it. Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. So I just feel very sensitive about this right now, and I am hoping that once we get to, like, the soul, what is it called? The, like, inheritance, that there's something to be done, but it feels just really like I have less faith that we're getting Dross back than I have before. Not because I don't think Lyndon will be able to, like, fix some problems, but because I'm starting to wonder if, like, Will White's intention is to keep things whirring along with different versions of Dross from here on out. And again, I respect it in terms of the story, but it just makes me really sad. I just am going to miss Dross so much if we never get him back. It's going to be like a real blow that I wasn't anticipating, because I took it for granted we would eventually get him back. And if we do, like, you know, because I took it for granted, I want to say getting him back would be too easy and there should be consequences and it would be, you know, like, but I want it. I took it for granted, probably mostly because I wanted it so badly. So that's what I'm saying. Evil is saying, I think Dross went Herald. If that's true, that even worries me more somehow. You know, like, I just don't know what Lyndon can accomplish, like, when the being that's, like, connected to his mind has the sort of abilities that Dross demonstrates without the cooperation that Dross was demonstrating earlier when it seemed like he considered himself in Lyndon's employ in a way. It does not feel like he sees things that way anymore. So can Lyndon do things without the consent of this being in the first place? I don't know how any of that works. So, okay. This fight, guys, oof, it is truly something. There is a moment where after Lyndon has destroyed all these tridents, Reigan Shen opens a bunch of portals and he sends a different attack through each portal for each of the fighters. And this is something else. He says something like, "You are privileged to witness the path of the King's Key." And of course, because he's the bad guy, and he's like, "Oh, you're privileged to witness." My first response was like, go fuck yourself, privileged. What the fuck are you talking about? And then it was described, and I was like, all right, that might be fair. Because this truly does sound insane. I love the idea, frankly, of being able to summon a different separate technique for each of the people that you are up against. Like, that is rad as hell. I love it. So, we've got a forged hand made of jade streaked with gold. The Madra was so dense it seemed physical, but Lyndon could feel that it was dense energy of life and earth. The hand was reaching out for zeal, and it was going to flatten him. An orange-white line blasted out of another portal. This was red dragon's breath, focused to such a degree that Lyndon could scarcely believe it. It must have been a launcher construct made from a red dragon herald, and it shot for Athen. Ocean blue tides gushed out of a third portal with enough pressure that the water itself could crush stone. I'm sorry. Somehow I missed that the first time. With enough pressure that the water itself could crush stone. I can't believe that I missed that. Inside the depths were glowing, flickering humanoid figures. This was a mysterious water technique headed for Yaren, and it brought an energy of suppression that struck at the soul as well as the body. A flurry of silver bat-like techniques rushed after Mercy, carrying sword energy complex enough that Lyndon couldn't quite identify its makeup. They were possessed by a furious will, like a swarm of bloodthirsty bees, and their very presence shook his senses until he felt like he was going to bleed from the ears. And then, I love, he is sending a dream technique at Lyndon. And Lyndon, that's the only one where Lyndon's like, literally, oh, no, that's fine. Because it's not going to be a problem because of Dross. And this is when he starts asking Dross for advice. What can we do about the techniques targeting Yaren? Inconclusive. Do we have enough time to block Mercy with the hollow domain? Inconclusive. And he starts to really sense that Dross is like desperate and ashamed because he can't be more help. Especially later, Dross mentions that Northstrider actually like did a model using him about how to beat Reigan Shen specifically. And he doesn't remember any of it. And he's like, he might be able to recollect all of that information eventually. But at the moment, it's not like that's not helping now. And, oh man, y'all, this was just so painful. I hated it. So, Lyndon tells Ethan to cover Zeal while he goes and defends Mercy and then Yaren. And Mercy still gets really badly wounded. Lyndon is able to take this, like, construct that's for health and attach it to her after she sustains her injuries, but it is truly like, if Reigan Shen had decided to pay any attention, he could have probably stopped him from doing that, and Mercy would be dead. I have a feeling probably that Reigan Shen does not want to kill Mercy out of everybody because of who her mother is, but at this point, I'm not sure how much is he actually worried about this stuff? So, he, like, begins to do what he can from the side as Ethan and Reigan Shen just go up against one another. And this truly is... this is wild. So, Ethan keeps starting to manifest an icon. And then sort of waving it away. And I wasn't sure what was going on because initially it says something about how, like, an image began to form at the ceiling, something more real than a working of dream and light. Lyndon began to see a shaft of polished wood projected from beyond reality. Then Ethan gestured, and the image cut off. Reigan Shen's head jerked back, and he looked truly shocked. "What are you thinking?" Ethan pointed another spear of pure Madra. "You are not my goal. You're just in my way." And I didn't put it together that this was the beginning of an icon manifesting. I swear to God, it didn't occur to me. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with me, you guys. I swear You know what I think? I think it's because I keep considering Ethan so much more advanced still than everybody else, even though he's not that much further ahead, that I was like, this would be behind him at this point, which I don't know why I would, like, that's not how that works. But bets on whether he was manifesting the broom icon right there, because there was a part of me that thought for sure that was a broom once I, like, stopped to think about it. There are a couple things that begin to manifest, and I don't know if it's the same thing over and over, or if it's, like, a variety of things that he keeps pushing away, but he later tells them that there is a particular icon that he wants to manifest, the joy icon, which is rare, but real. Look, this is part of what concerns me about the sense of doom that I feel hanging over Ethan now. He says something about how he doesn't want to end up like his ancestor did because he was not a kind man. And when he says, I don't want to end up like he did, I think Yaren or Mercy says, like, what do you mean insanely powerful and successful? And, and he says, alone. And this is what's making me like, he actually does understand Osriel apparently kind of sucked as a person. So he wants to manifest the joy icon to not be like Osriel, which is understandable. I get that. But I feel like there's a different, like, explanation if he's going to be sacrificing himself on behalf of his friends. And I don't know. I might be barking up the complete wrong tree here. And all of the stuff that I like, all the time I take up talking about this will wind up being a waste because this wasn't right at all. But I just keep thinking about what he might want to do, because I think that a lot of us are on the same page here with assuming that somehow Linden is going to take up Osriel's mantle because of his connection to the void and because of the way that Osriel was connected to emptiness and was able to manifest destruction. I can't help but wonder if it's Linden, like I think. Ethan isn't, in the end, as important. And he might be concerned about keeping Linden in a place that is merciful, that cares, and might be part of why he felt so confident in Linden and invested as much in him as he did, because of Linden's like humility and judgment and in some ways caution, even though that sounds silly, but you know, it's true. I'm just in dread over here, guys. Okay. So, this moment here, he goes into this fucking water technique to help Yaren, and this shit is so goddamned creepy, you guys. All I could think about, I just started covering Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood for Spoil Me, which is going to be coming up later tonight if anybody wants to stay up and watch it. And there is the being that he meets in the first episode when he crosses over into like whatever this other space is. And the being is like a weird empty silhouette surrounded by a sort of black fog. And that was what I kept picturing here, was these sort of like empty spaces. And he keeps calling them spirits, but it feels like there's like even less to them than that. And he can like cut them in parts, but they reassemble themselves really quickly. And he doesn't know what to do. And eventually he winds up like zeroing in on the one that's going after Yaren, which this is, you know, Will White doesn't do this often in these books. But now that I've read Elder Empire, I'm like, okay, but he has this in him, though. That doesn't really fit with the tone of this world right now, so it's not here in this series. But the body horror thing, a huge spirit, obviously the leader of the White Shadows, loomed over her. Linden had seen many strange remnants, but this one resembled something like a soft centipede with human hands instead of legs. I could have gone my entire life without ever reading that. Truly. The only thing that makes me like have some qualms about getting back into the Elder Empire series. He does some creepy shit in those books, you guys. Truly, if you have not read them. I mean, there's definitely magic going on, but it's a really different sort than in this world. And there is a lot more body horror type shit, and it's truly like so creepy. It's hard to read, that kind of level, you know, where I find myself reading faster to kind of get it over with. So he gets this thing right in the head, and it pops the sort of bubble, the technique. And poor Yaren is saying, I thought that heralds couldn't drown, but the way that she's gasping, it seems pretty clear that she was about to, or who knows what, you know, maybe it wasn't drowning, but it felt like drowning. I don't know. And then he starts talking with Dross in his head about what's going on with Ethan continually rejecting icons. And Lyndon starts to be like, what in the hell could he be doing that would, like, what reasoning could there be to somebody who has the sort of foresight and planning that Ethan has for turning down an advancement during a time where it seems like advancement would be literally the perfect, like, option right now? This must be part of his plan. Advancing to Sage had to hurt him somehow, even if that advancement would bring him advantages. And Lyndon begins to come in here and use his authority up against Reigan Shen, because frankly, he hardly has any Madra left. Like, so much of the rest of his energy sources for fighting are sort of either completely on zero or need to be saved in order to, like, help. And so he taps his authority. Guys, I cannot tell you how delightful it was. Earlier, Reigan Shen tells Lyndon stop, and Lyndon says no. And that already, I was just like, it doesn't work as seamlessly as you want it to. It makes him pause long enough that it's still an advantage to Reigan Shen. So, you know, don't love that. But the fact that Lyndon can compete in that respect in any way here, like, truly very exciting. So Lyndon's gaze was naturally drawn to the golden portal forming behind Reigan Shen. Close, Lyndon commanded. The portal made from the path of King's Key led onto a void space, so it was the perfect thing for Lyndon to effect with his authority. But at the same time, it was Reigan Shen's personal property, and perhaps might even count as a part of his power. So he closes this, and it allows Ethan to get him in the gut with a hollow spear. And then he opens another portal, and Lyndon can feel that he has gone a lot harder with this one, and there's no chance of closing it, but he can, like, add his authority to help it along with opening even further. And I didn't understand what this was going to accomplish here, but he opens it, and then Reigan Shen says, "Greetings from Tiberian." I thought I could not hate this motherfucker more. I was so wrong. I was so wrong, you guys. What the fuck has he done? I didn't know this could happen. I am disgusted. Do you hear me? I truly, like, once I realized what was going on, because he says greetings from Tiberian, and I'm like, wait, is Tiberian not actually dead? There's no way he's still alive. Like, they would have sensed him. He's a monarch. If he's not dead, they would know. It's somehow, like, more of a betrayal. So, he's got Tiberian's fucking remnant in a collar, enslaved to him. And it's one of the rare moments where you see that Ethan hadn't considered this possibility. Truly, even Lyndon is startled by the straight up grief that he is feeling off of Ethan at this moment. And yeah, because as much as you might hate this guy, I don't think anybody wants to accuse a person of being capable of something like this. Granted, he's not like a person. And I say that in as much as, you know, he's just a monster, but also he is like a sacred beast as well. But I truly... And the thing is, if Reigan Shen has done this, he had to figure out that he could do this from somewhere. So who else has done this? This feels like a thing that, you know, it's like giving me, again, the Full Metal Alchemist with, like, they're doing something that's like, it's a taboo, but, like, low-key, a lot of people have tried to do it. I am desperate for Tiberian to be rescued from Reigan Shen. I don't know what happens to his remnant after that. Genuinely don't know what anyone would want to do with it. Like, what would Ethan choose if he had his options? But if this book ends and Tiberian is still under Reigan's control, I don't know what I'll do. I'm going to be really upset. That's all I'm going to say. I truly ugh, my God. Rob says, bit of a parallel with a Carrie's remnant. No, Rob. A Carrie's remnant was being kept by somebody who was deeply held deep affection toward her as a means of feeling like she was near. And it was, no parallel, sir. She's not being used as an attack dog. Christ. And what's so awful is that Tiberian clearly has a, sort of, what's the word I want? There's a consciousness still to him where he sees Ethan and is like, oh, so you did survive. And there's grief on his face as well, because he knows that he is going to be set against this person who once meant a great deal to him. And that is the part, if Tiberian didn't know what was going on and he just seemed like a completely, what's the word I want? He was a mindless drone that was just in the shape of Tiberian and had Tiberian's overall abilities, but didn't get what was going on. It would be cruel in its own way, but it wouldn't feel quite as awful as this. Both Ethan and Tiberian are being poked at in a particularly malicious way that is tough. Ugh, hated it. So Lyndon continues to push it open, and Reigan Shen is only focused on the remnant. So he doesn't notice that this is happening, and it pushed against the labyrinth, clashing against the authority that prevented spatial transportation until Lyndon could hear the two forces groaning against one another. But the labyrinth's rule was endless. Reigan Shen's authority was not. With a snap, the portal structure collapsed. And I was like, rad. Oh, love it. And guys, I could not handle this. It snapped shut. Reigan Shen is blazing with rage, looks over at Lyndon, and Lyndon gives a smile and says, apologies. Oh, shit. That is just great. I love this. I love this so much. So this is when Dross makes contact, and the consciousness of the labyrinth zeroes in on Reigan Shen and gives him a portal to come to it, because Reigan Shen is like, I can grant your wish. And they manage to get out of this alive because Reigan Shen takes this opportunity that he's been trying to get the labyrinth to give him this whole time, and it hasn't. So everybody is so fucking worn out after this. Mercy barely made it. Poor Zeal has burns all over him. It's really bad. And then we have Dross, who comes out, vermin! He flees from us like a coward, little knowing that we may bide our time and seek revenge. And then he comes out and has this tiny black crown on his head, and I'm just like, oh my God, no. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. Already talked about him wanting to, pull the joy icon. And Ethan tells them here, Tiberian's dream was to rid the world of dread gods. We found a method of doing so, and I encouraged him to pursue the cooperation of the other monarchs. He insisted on starting with Reigan Shen, against my advice, I might add. You can usually count on monarchs to avoid open conflict, because there's rarely a definitive winner. Reigan Shen struck back almost immediately. In the end, Tiberian was not his match. It is not simple to destroy dread gods. No monarch can defeat one individually, and while the monarchs could collectively destroy the dread gods together, there is a reason they do not. a reason I am forbidden by my oath to mention, but I am not forbidden from demonstrating it to you. You will find that reason deeper in the labyrinth unless I miss my guess. And I'm like, dying with curiosity. So, they of course talk here about how Reigan Shen wants Cradle, all of our world, and sees the Dread Gods as the way to take it. And truly, guys, I don't even know why people want shit like that. What do you get? I don't understand being power hungry in that sort of way. You know, I want power in the way that, like, I want to help people. I want power so that I can improve the lives of those around me and improve the lives of friends who deserve better. I don't get just wanting to run things. Like, don't you have better shit to do? I mean, come on. Anyway, this is when Lyndon decides that he wants to keep going forward with everybody. And there's a moment here where he brings tears to Ethan's eyes by saying, what is the point of having the kind of power we have if we can't help our friends to move forward with us? Like, and he says, I don't want to win by giving something up. I want it all. I want all of it. And I was like, I love when he gets greedy. That's like, you know, I just enjoy it. Lyndon, just when he's, all of it. Yep, on board. So, this is when Yaren kisses him a couple times. I love it so much. And then the final chapter here is Mercy waking up and them all surrounding her and telling her that they are going to help her advance. And she is like not positive that this will work, but the way that they look at her, it's so clear they have absolute faith that she is going to, like, there's just no question in their minds, you know? And there's moments like this in everyone's lives, hopefully, where you see somebody just have like such total faith in you that it's not even like you feel an anxiety to live up to it. It's more that the fact that they have such faith can make you doubt what you think about yourself. You know, like, I really don't feel like I could do it. But you are so positive that I'm like, do I actually even, like, am I missing something? Maybe I'm missing something. I love this for her so much. So she hugs all of them, including Ethan. It's so cute. I love that Ethan is the one to try and say we're wasting time, but then when she scoops him in on the hug, he's like, oh, this is nice. And what they're able to do here, they're in this wild room where they have been able to pull echoes of people that this place has consumed power from out of the walls. And they pull out Malice because she has been here before, which Mercy didn't know, and she feels sort of like weird about the fact that her mother never mentioned that she'd been here before. And she goes up against her mother in an attempt to sort of jiggle loose what her revelation is. And there is so much here that I wish I had more time to talk about, but what it comes down to is she realizes she is the opposite in terms of overall personality and goals as her mom. They each actually do live up to the names they've been given, and she wants to rule with kindness and compassion, and her mother enjoys the feelings of having enemies quake before her and the power that she holds over people. That's like part of the draw for her, and that's just not Mercy's jam. That's not why she likes this, you know? And she manages to advance, but as she does, the room like responds to it, and there's a pretty like intense series of like Hunger Madra attacks that they have to fend off while she's in the midst of advancing. While that's going on, Ethan is talking to Zeal, and this is probably like one of the more heartbreaking conversations. And I still think that there's a chance we can get Zeal to come around, but he really feels like the thing that Ethan says, because Zeal mentions how he used to burn with a passion that has been put out and is now just a pile of ash. And Ethan says, yeah, the thing is that my attitude is I look at the ash and think, what a blaze that must have been. And I don't know why, guys, that line made me really emotional. Like, the concept of it was there once. I bet it could be there again. Being said to a person who just doesn't really either believe it or want to believe it. You know, the thing with Zeal, I think, is he was so devastated by what happened to the people that he was in charge of that I don't know if he is willing to put himself in the path of that kind of like incredible grief again. And I can't help but sympathize with that. You know, this is something that I've had a few friends say to me, especially lately. The past few years have been really hard on folks, both because they're, you know, getting separated from family in like ideological ways that they can't really overcome. And they're like literally losing people because folks are dying of COVID out here. And I've had more than one person say to me, I just wish I didn't care so much. And I feel like that's sort of Zeal's deal. He wishes he wants to not care, and he's doing as much as he can to keep himself from seeming to care. The thing is, he does care, and it's bothering him that it's beginning to happen again, and he's retreating while at the same time doing what he thinks is the right thing to do. And those things are going to converge in a point that's not like avoidable anymore very soon. And I don't know. It's just, he's just, it's tough, man. This whole conversation. He says, it's too late. I don't have what it takes to become a sage. How would you know? Ethan shot back. What are you, some kind of sage? Because besides, if you can reach peak Archlord, you know what it takes to become a herald. Brute force. And, I'm just really eager. I want Zeal to come back. You know, I don't know. So the chapter ends with the room entrances blurring and one remaining. And Ethan says, I think I can see where we're going. Subject 1 couldn't keep us out any longer, so it's drawing us closer. Lyndon didn't like the sound of that. And that is the end of chapter 17. So, I'm going to wrap. I'm sorry I was late. Thank you guys very much for bearing with me. Thank you, Andy, again for commissioning this, except I also kind of hate you. And I will see you all next week with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.